Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm doing some trash to treasure home decor. For my first project, I'm going to be working on this little white wooden tray. Now, I actually really like how it looks at the moment. It looks weathered and worn, so we're just going to be working on the center. I'm going to be using Roycycled's Spring Blocks Decoupage paper. Now, I have these listed on my website, so if you're in Australia, you can grab those there. I'm going to be particularly focusing on the beautiful design on the top right-hand corner. I think that would look perfect with this tray. So I'm going to trim that out, and I'm just being careful not to disturb or cut any of the designs next to it, because obviously we can use those for other projects. I then need to work out how much of this paper I'm actually going to be using. So I'm going to position the design inside the tray, and then I'm going to be using my fingernails to mark out and crease the areas that I'm going to have to trim off. As I'm doing this, I'm really making sure that the top bow section is going to be visible and that I have the design straight. I'm then going to use my scissors to trim off the excess. And as I'm cutting, I often leave a couple of millimeters of extra space just in case I have made any errors while I've been creasing. I don't want there to be any gaps. I also sometimes reposition the decoupage paper in the space where I'm cutting just to double check that I've got it correct. I'm then going to be using Paint Couture's Decoupage Medium in Matte. I'm going to apply a generous amount directly to the tray. Now, you could definitely paint the inside of the tray before applying your decoupage paper. Decoupage paper can be quite transparent, so you are going to be able to see some of the texture that's already there, but I've decided to embrace it. I feel like it might look a little bit odd to have a perfect center and a distressed exterior. So I'm just laying my paper down in the product, and then you can see here that I am smoothing that out. I just have a little ball of cling wrap that I'm using, and if I see any air bubbles, I just sort of lift that paper up, reposition it, and then again, just using that cling wrap so that I don't create any friction with my fingers and create any tears. I'm going to continue to work in sections. I tend to do this when I have a bigger project. So just laying down that product and then smoothing the paper down over it. I also did use my mister to lightly mist the paper. I find that this helps the paper to stretch and also helps to minimize wrinkles. As I am securing down the last section, I'm just smoothing that out again with that little bit of cling wrap, and then I'm going to lay another coat of that decoupage medium over the top of the entire base of the tray. When the decoupage medium was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I'm just going to be applying it over the top of the ribbon design on this decoupage design. I'm going in heavier in the sections where there is less details, and then I'm going over lightly the sections that have more of the stripes and the details, using hardly any product in those sections. And I am really loving the shine that this is bringing. It's adding an extra element to it. And this is definitely something that you can do. You can go in and add colors or metallics like I am over the top of the decoupage designs just to add a bit of extra interest. And in my case, I feel like it adds a little bit of elegance as well. When the bronze was completely dry, I then took out my craft knife, and I'm just going to go around the edges. My decoupage medium is completely dry as well, and I'm just going to cut and then peel back the excess paper. You just want to make sure that the decoupage is completely dry before you try this. And here's a look at our finished tray. I really love how this turned out. The tray itself was already beautiful, but adding the Roycycled Spring Blocks decoupage paper has really just completed this project. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my second project, I'm going to be working on this little wooden planter box that I thrifted. I think it is absolutely adorable. The base can come out, which is very handy. I'm going to be using Redesign's Parisian Charm mold, and I'm going to be dusting it first with cornstarch, and then I'm going to be using my Dust Air Dry clay. I'm just sort of flattening out the clay first a little bit, and then I'm going to start working it into the mold, sort of pushing and spreading that clay around, and then using my fingers to pull the excess out. Once I've finished filling the design with clay and making sure that every area has an even amount of clay in it, I'm just going to start pushing that excess out. If you are struggling with this particular step, you could use a plastic card or a spatula to help you remove that excess clay and get a smooth back. Once I'm happy with that, I am going to start flexing the mold. I find that this helps that clay to release. So I'm just working my way around, flexing it, and then I'm going to flip it over and curve that mold back, and the casting will release. I'm then going to flip the casting over and add my Sealy's Quickset wood glue over the back, and then I'm going to use my fingers to spread that around and make sure that I've got a nice even coat. I'm then going to be placing this design in the center of one of the sides of the planter, and I'm just going to smooth that down, making sure that's stuck down really well. And then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to put the exact same mold on the opposite side of the planter box. I didn't put it on every side. I felt like that would be just a little bit too overwhelming, so just the front and the back. I then took out these wooden beads that I picked up from Kmart Australia, and I'm going to be adding them to the top corners of the planter. I'm going to be using a combination of Gorilla Super Glue gel on the base of the bead and also some hot glue for immediate hold. And then I'm going to position the bead on the corner, and I'm going to be adding these to each of the corners, and I'm going to wipe off the excess with a wet wipe, and then I'm going to use my hot glue gun to actually fill up the top section of the beads so that it's an enclosed whole round shape. We don't want to see the hole. And I'm going to be repeating that same process and gluing down each bead in the exact same way. I really feel that adding the beads to the top corners really took the project to a new level. If you don't want to use hot glue to fill the holes in the beads, another option is to fill them with air dry clay instead. I let my clay castings dry overnight, and the next day I came in with Paint Couture's pine cone chalk paint. I'm pouring that out into a plastic container, and then I'm going to be using my salt wash mixture, adding that to the paint and stirring it really well. I want to give this more of a stone or concrete look, and salt wash is perfect for achieving that. I'm then going to start applying it with my chip brush. Definitely use a chip brush. Salt wash can be really hard on your bristles, so it's best to use a brush that you don't mind if it gets a bit damaged. And also, chip brushes can create texture, so it's actually helping you create a more texturized project. So I'm just going to continue adding that salt wash over the entire piece. I'm going in a lot lighter over the top of the castings. I don't want to obscure any of the details, but I do also want to make sure that it does look like one cohesive piece. This salt wash is also definitely going to help to bring together the beads that we added. It's going to help blend that in more with the rest of the piece. It's going to hide some of that hot glue that we added. So salt wash is definitely a really great option if you're wanting to create that textured vintage look. As I'm applying the salt wash mixture over the top of the beads, I'm being sure to make sure I've got plenty of product so we can hide that hot glue. And also I am moving the project around to make sure I can get at all those different angles. I picked pine cone chalk paint because I wanted something that would look like age. It perhaps could even look a little bit like rust as well. I wanted something that it didn't matter if it showed through underneath, that it would just add to that overall vintage look. Once the salt wash was completely dry, I took out Paint Couture's Peace Mineral Paint, and I'm going to be applying that over the entire project. Over the top of my castings, I am going to be going in a little bit heavier. I don't really need a lot of that pine cone showing through. We didn't put much of it on the castings at all. We really do want the details of those molds to really be the star really of this piece. But I am allowing my brush to skip over some of the texture in some of the other areas because we do want a little bit peeking through. It's going to add to that weathered and worn look, and I'm going to just continue working my way around. I ended up doing I'll say 1.5 coats because my second coat was really just a matter of me touching up certain areas, because as I said, I don't need it to be perfect. We want a little bit of that pine cone salt wash mixture showing through. And I think overall it definitely was a really fun and worn look. Definitely something that you could use to decorate your garden pots with, or anything really that you want to give that sort of vintage outdoor French country look. I also added that piece mineral paint to the inside of the planter as well. When the paint was completely dry, I took out Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown glaze, and I'm going to be really working that into the details of the castings. And I'm also loving how it's catching the texture that we created with that salt wash mixture as well. So really working it into the details. And then I'm going to be using a wet wipe to pull back some of the excess. I'm going to be pulling back more on the castings as opposed to the rest of the planter box. And I'm sort of dabbing at it in certain areas as well. I find that when you dab at the glaze, it can often look a little bit more like age spots. And also this paint has a built-in sealer, so I'm able to wipe back as much or as little as I want. If you're using a paint that doesn't have a sealer, I definitely recommend that you seal your paint first with a top coat, let that dry, and then come in with your glaze. It just gives you more control over the tone of your piece. So as you can see, I'm continuing to add that glaze to the rest of the project, just following the same steps, wiping it on, wiping it off, and again, really allowing that glaze to sit down in all of the texture and the crevices. If you don't have access to glaze, you could create a brown paint wash as an alternative, or you could use perhaps a brown wax. If I inspire you to try any of the Paint Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. When the glaze was dry, I began applying Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic to the castings, and I'm going to be dabbing that product on. I don't need it to be perfect coverage. I want this to look a little bit like faded gilding, but I am going to be adding it over the top of all of those details. Again, it doesn't need to be even, it doesn't need to be perfect, but I really do love this pop of metallic and shine. I definitely feel like it finishes the piece off. Now, if bronze isn't to your taste, you could go with gold or silver or copper. There are lots of luxe metallics to choose from. I did a video a couple of months ago where I used similar techniques to create a cast iron style planter. I will try and pop that in this video so you can check that out. But these are definitely techniques that you can use to create beautiful garden decor. And here's a look at our finished planter box. I love how this turned out. I think it's amazing how you can transform something plain with some castings, some wooden beads, and some salt wash. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project, I'm going to be working on this sweet little ceramic bird. I loved the shape, but I did not love the color, and someone had actually drawn on it, I think, with markers. So we're going to give it an update. I still had some of my pine cone and salt wash mixture left over, so I'm going to just be applying that directly over the top of my project. Now, I have cleaned this. If you are worried about adhesion, I definitely recommend that you use Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer. Often I do that, but I find that salt wash really does allow your paint to stick really well to most surfaces. I didn't have any issues, but if you are a bit worried, definitely pop that primer down first. I'm just going to be applying one coat of the salt wash mixture over the top to create some texture. I let my project dry overnight, and the next day I came in with Paint Couture's Abundance Mineral Paint, and I'm applying this over the top, but I'm allowing my brush to skip over certain areas to allow that pine cone salt wash mixture to peek through, almost like perhaps it's rust. I only ended up doing one coat of this, and this does have a built-in top coat, so I could have just left it at this, but we are going to be trying something a little bit different on this project. I'm just going to let this dry completely first before we move on. When the paint was dry, I took out IOD's Petite Fleur Pink Paint Inlay, and I'm going to be adding this design to my little bird. However, the shape isn't exactly right for what I want. I want it draping around the neck of the bird, so I'm going to be trimming it into pieces so that I can make it work for the project that I have. I'm also going to be trimming out that excess paper so that the inlay will sit a bit better. Once I had it to the point that I thought was going to work, I decided to cut it just a little bit more into a couple more smaller pieces so I could adjust the angle. I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Extreme Garden Satin with my paint inlays today. I'm applying a nice generous coat in the area where the inlay is going to go. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to be placing that inlay design side down into my wet clear coat, and I'm just going to smooth that down with my fingers and being careful not to move the design. I don't want it to move. And once I've got that down, I'm going to add a little bit more product down the bottom just to make sure that I have that there, because inlays have to be put into either wet clear coat or some sort of paint. I'm then going to apply some more on the right hand side there and then put the other part of the inlay there, and then I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side so that we can continue that paint inlay design up around the bird's neck. Once that's in position, I'm going to be applying some more of that satin clear coat, but I'm going to be adding it to the back part of the bird, and I'm going to be positioning the other part of that inlay that we cut off on the back there. Once I have that pressed down and in place, I'm going to take out my water mister and lightly mist the inlays on the front and the back. This helps to activate those paint pigments. I'm using a wet wipe to apply a bit of pressure and to move that water around. I then let that dry completely. It took about half an hour, and then once it's dry, I'm going to mist it again. This is going to help that paint inlay to release. So I'm misting it. I'll then use a wet wipe to sort of dab at that water, work it into the paint inlay, and then after about 30 seconds, I will begin to pull that away. I'm removing the inlay slowly and gently. If you feel any resistance, add a little bit more water and give it a little bit more time. But as you can see, these are coming away really nicely, and this already looks very sweet in my opinion. Now I could have left it here, but I want this to have more of a hand-painted look. So I'm going to mist the design and reactivate the paint pigments, and then I'm going to go in with a small paintbrush, and I'm going to just sort of dab at those paint pigments, spread them around a little bit, change the shape a little bit, just to give it more of a hand-painted sort of vintage, almost folk art sort of look. And I'm just going to continue doing that to each of the different sections of the inlay, because the paint pigments can be reactivated by water, and I really love this look. I did it on a decorative book in a previous video as well, and I just think it's such a fun look and a really great way to customize your projects. Now obviously, if this look wasn't for you, you really liked the more perfect look of the inlay before this step, you can obviously just leave this out. If you don't have paint inlays, you could always try hand painting on some little florals, or you could use transfers or add some stamps and then sort of paint those. There's lots of different possibilities with this look if you want to add some florals to your home decor. Once I was finished, I took my wet wipe and sort of dabbed at the paint to sort of pull back a little bit and give it a bit more of a vintage and worn feel. Once that paint was dry, I took out my Extreme Garden Satin, and I'm going to lightly brush over some more of that clear coat to seal it in. Now, obviously, this can reactivate the pigment, so if you're worried about that, you could use a spray sealer instead. When that was dry, I took out my brush that I was using with Van Dyke Brown in the previous project, and I'm going to be applying that over the top of the bird and wiping back the excess. I don't have any extra glaze on my brush. I'm just using what was left over and then wiping it back. I'm loving how the glaze is capturing the texture of the salt wash, and it's giving this bird a really fun vintage look. If this was a little bit too grungy for you, you could leave this step out, or you could come in with a whitewash or a white wax to lighten it up instead. And here's our finished bird decor. I think this turned out really sweet. It was just an added bit of pop of colour, some florals, perfect for spring and summer. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that it's inspired you to take some items that others might consider to be trash and turn them into treasure with molds, paint inlays, decoupage paper. Let me know if you had a favourite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.